Welcome to this edition of Africa 360. We are the program that goes across the African continent to bring you news and views you won't get anywhere else. And that's news with a distinctly African perspective. I'm Maroleng, and this is Africa 360. In this week's show, more than 5 billion rand languishes unclaimed while workers in the mining sector suffer. This week, Africa 360 looks at beneficiation in the mining sector, where retired or injured workers are forced to wait years for payouts after years of back-breaking labor underground. The mining sector is the backbone of the South African economy, generating billions annually. But for the workers who leave their homes to spend years underground, accessing their compensation becomes a task almost as arduous as the work itself. Once retired, many are unable to access their provident funds. Africa 360's producer Lindsay Schutel and the Africa 360 team tracked down miners and their beneficiaries still waiting to be paid.
School starts at 8 a.m. in Nhlangano. But long before that, the Mzebele siblings are hard at work. Their morning chores vital to the family's survival. The winter crop isn't much, but it's enough for their mother to collect and sell. Smangele Mzebele scrapes together a meager living from the land. Life is hard without her husband. Necessity has made her the primary provider. Building a life from very little. It's a cycle that has continued for generations. A cycle that should have ended by now. For a while life was better. Her husband, Lucky, provided for the family with a good job in Johannesburg. But tragedy and a family feud forced her to return to her parents' homestead. Life should have been simpler for Lifa and Dili. Now at 67, he's forced to return to a hard life on the land. Rebuilding his life above the earth in Lesotho, when he should be resting after years of working below the earth in South Africa's mines. Zabela's husband, Lucky, returned to Swaziland after more than a decade as a mine worker, but only to die at home from silicosis in 2011. Even though she no longer wears her traditional widow's dress, the pain is still fresh. Stricken after losing the main provider, Zabela's battle began with her in-laws. She alleges that they deprived her children of food, tried to disprove the legality of her marriage to Lucky, and even going as far as to impersonate her to claim her benefits. Succumbing to stress and grief, Zabela had a stroke at age 27.
The
mines called me and they wanted to ask about the upkeep for my children and I. I was annoyed. Why are they calling me now? I've been going over and over and all they gave me was empty promises.
Liso eyes indlebe umlomo mouth
nganyanya ngacasuka athi bangibidela in so side isikhathi ngilo ngiya bangibida banginika lithemba lethi kutolunga
dinwele masombluko mande.
The children were nagging me. They wanted to know what happened to their father's money. They didn't have enough to eat. That's what made me go. The children were going to blame me, saying I've never got their father's money.
Digging for gold brought some joy to Ndili. he was able to build a home for his family. But when he was too old to drive the underground locomotive, he was forced to retire and promised benefits. Nearly 3 years later, he has a dozen mouths to feed and only 10 rand to his name.
Instead of stopping me from working and now not giving me what is due to me, it would have been better if they had killed me, so my family and I would not know this life of poverty.
These documents that Date Ndili guards so closely record nearly 40 years of hard, back-breaking work. But the only problem is he can neither read nor write. Being literate helped Nzebele. She could complete the reams of paperwork required, but it still took almost 3 years and pressure from the Africa 360 team to claim what was rightfully hers.
I'm very happy I got the money. All of it. Thank you so much. I couldn't believe it. I really wasn't expecting anything anymore. My children and I will now live a better life with no stress.
After nearly 3 years of struggle and determination, rising above grief and family feud, Maroleng can finally claim what is hers. 3 months ago, mining recruitment company Deba established this call center to fast-track claims. The regional agency helps miners and their beneficiaries access their benefits free of charge. A desperate attempt to simplify an overly complex process. But for miners who only required their fingerprints to sign up to what they thought would be a better life, it's an unfair process. And many remain just a name on a bulging database.
With a backlog of 5 billion rand just in terms of provident funds owing to roughly 250,000 people, you cannot say it's working. It is not working.
The Mine Workers Provident Fund is responsible for administrating more than half of the unpaid benefits. The 25-year-old organization has recently embarked on an awareness campaign to educate miners about their rights. Provident funds exist in almost every sector. Why is it that the mining sector has taken so long to educate its workers?
The objective of the employer is maximum output in terms of work, and those people are supposed to be at work. The only time that I can access these members is the very same time that they are supposed to be pushing production. So you have to balance that. In any given point in time, you have to get 15 minutes there and 15 minutes there because these people are supposed to be doing their work.
These plush offices are where many of the mining houses are based. Their profits built on the backs of miners like Lifa Ntili and Maroleng Nzebele's husband, Lucky Masuku, with over 5 billion rand still unpaid and at least 200,000 miners in limbo. It's clear the miners' beneficiation process is in a shambles. Administrators say they are trying to simplify the process, but in the meantime, it takes at least 4 years before miners and their beneficiaries even see a cent of what they are owed, while families are forced to fend for themselves. Lindsay Schutel, Johannesburg.
Do join us after the break as we unpack the issues with representatives from the Provident Fund, some of the researchers who've been looking into this matter, and the miners themselves. And that's only on Africa 360.
Till today, African males still believe that if I tell my wife, this is how much I'm going to get, my wife's going to kill me. And that is a fact.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Africa 360. Today, we are focusing on social security benefits in the mining sector, particularly the challenges that former mine workers experience in accessing their retirement benefit. I'm joined by Dr. Bheki Moyo from the Southern Africa Trust. Also joining us is Vamajele from the Southern African Miners Association and Lihle Khoza from the Mine Workers Provident Fund. Thank you also for joining us here on Africa 360. Lihle, let me start with you. It is alleged that organizations like yourself have difficulties in tracing some of these mine workers. Why is this? What is the real challenge? Why can't you disperse and give these people their benefits?
Initially, one would ask, how come did these people leave the mining sector and left their money in the funds? And that goes back to eras where there was lack of dissemination of information previously, where miners knew that I'm contributing to a fund, but no information was shared with them in terms of how do you then access this money, when do you then access this benefit, and what is this benefit that is due to you. That's the first thing. The second thing also is the people who were employed at the mines at that time, semi-skilled literacy levels, it also contributed to that. Thirdly, you have what is called being called an African male, who would not share information with family. Till today, African males still believe that if I tell my wife, this is how much I'm going to get, my wife's going to kill me. So, and that is a fact. So it happens in communities that we live in. So as a result, you find that when we now look at finding these people, many of them, they came from the homelands, from the foreign countries, and they came and stayed in the hostels. They were registered using the hostel addresses, and then they left afterwards. We have got no way of finding them.
But so, you know, and I'm sorry for cutting you off here, but that the problem is well defined. We understand those legacy issues, and they're not just legacy issues that affect the mining sector and those due their benefits. Therefore, the question is, why not spend some of that 8 billion to actually trace these people, invest money to engage investigators, communities, to try and locate these people? Isn't it worth the effort?
It is worth the effort. The funds are doing exactly that. We have engaged services of tracers. They come in two forms. There's tracers who are doing desktop tracing, which means that they stay in their offices, they access databases, and they try and find these people. That follows up with a sending of a letter, completion of forms and all that. But again, who are you sending this letter to? And also, these people are not really economical active as you would find them in your trans unions and things like that. Then there's the second part, which is your physical tracing. We've got physical tracers who would go out and look, and the latter is actually expensive. So if I have a miner who has got 2,000 rand in our coffers, it means that I'm going to deduct about 1,800 paying a tracer, and the miner ends up getting 200 rands. So it is not.
Let's bring in Vamajele here. It's really a sad indictment, I think, on the funds themselves, and indeed associations like the Southern African Miners Association, and I think even the trade unions, that there's so much money out there. There are these challenges that we understand, but not much is being done. What is associations, an association like yours, doing to assist these miners to get these benefits, I think, which they crucially need?
We have just embarked on some exercises on ensuring that the rights of the mine workers are actually observed by themselves as well as the outside the communities. We are working on this at a very small scale. The reason why we are working on a very small scale is because of the capacity, and again, on the issue of knowledge as well as awareness.
But then, Mr. Jele, why isn't it possible for you to engage organizations that have the money so that they can give you capacity in terms of resources and ensure that you are adequately financed to achieve this noble objective of getting these benefits to the people? Is there any cooperation between you, or do you act as silos?
We do have collaboration between us and the mine workers associations. If I may, let me just give you a scenario. In the year 2013, Mine Workers Provident Fund embarked on SADC roadshows. We've been to Mozambique, Lesotho, Swaziland, and Botswana, where we collaborated with the governments, Department of Labor's there. We collaborated with the associations, and we said, here we are, we're bringing our teams. We announced in the countries that we were going into so that we can get the people who we need to pay benefits. Yeah. We did find people, but some of them, people who attest, are worked at the mine, but you will find that they are not in our database. So they belong to the other funds because they didn't know even what is the name of the fund that they belong to.
So the issue here, Dr. Moyo, is the question about what our governments and what are regional organizations doing about this? Because surely governments must be looking at all of these huge sums of money and saying, really, these are due to our people. Let us help you. Are they helping, or are they just not interested?
Well, I think for those countries that were mentioned, Swaziland, Mozambique, Lesotho, what we heard in the meetings, we actually heard government representatives. Some of them have begun to have bilateral discussions with the South African government. So you would have maybe the Department of Labour talking with the Department of Labour in the other country to find ways on how they could actually address this issue. But do
they go as far as making their databases available to provident funds so that they could possibly begin or expedite that process of tracing across borders?
May I come in?
Well, I think they can.
Yep.
May I come into this one? There is a commitment from all of the governments. I will specifically make an example of South Africa. South Africa has committed themselves under the Deputy President to implement a program called One Stop Shop, where they will offer almost all of the services an ex-mine worker will need. And on that one-stop shop, all the retirement funds will be represented. Whenever you come as an ex-mine worker and say that you left your money in one of the funds, it's easy. They can trace you and you can get your fund
easy to trace you, and the process beginning where you can begin finding those funds. Do stay with us, because after the break, we'll continue our discussion about some of the challenges facing retired mine workers when they try to access their retirement benefits. When we come back, we'll also explore the possible solutions to this problem, and that's only on Africa 360.
Whatever system we put in place, it must be such that it addresses the past but also the future.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Africa 360. This week we're looking into the portability of social benefits that are due to mine workers, particularly those who worked in South Africa. We understand that there's an estimated 6 billion rand worth of these benefits sitting in the coffers of some of these retirement and provident funds. Well, joining me to help us understand this are various interlocutors from the sector that tries to assist miners find these funds. Let me come back to this issue, Dr. Moyo, which is that if there's so much money that is present, and we understand that the governments are now also engaging the funds and engaging communities and mining organizations around trying to resolve it, why then has it been such a secret that so much money is around and little effort is being made, as far as I'm concerned, to get this money to the people?
Well, I'm not sure whether it's been a secret, but I think, as you would know, without any knowledge out there, I mean, you wouldn't know. So the study that we did kind of, for us, at least the trust and our partners, unlocked the amounts. But I think that one of the things that we are beginning to miss in this discussion is that for us as the trust, we are focusing also on other vulnerable groups. So it's not just the ex-miners that we need to talk about here. It's also their beneficiaries. So, for example, where the ex-miner has died, the wives find it even very difficult to even begin to explore the possibilities of actually accessing this amount. So back to your question, I think one of the things that came out of this meeting is to begin to explore also possibilities, at least in our view, of maybe investing this money, if you cannot trace these people, investing this money in the communities where these ex-miners came from. That in a way could begin to address the challenges of that community from a broader poverty eradication point of view, as opposed to keeping the money.
So then, Lihla, one of the questions that I must ask you is that, is there a will amongst the provident funds, amongst the retirement funds, to actually give away this money that is in their hands right now? Or it would make sense for them just to accrue the interest themselves and continue with the current dispensation? Maybe 6 million can become 12 million.
I must say, Chris, that there is absolutely no reason why funds would say we do not want to pay beneficiaries.
I can think of two.
Retirement funds were purely put into place to alleviate poverty, to ensure that at the time of need, when these people cannot work, this money is available for them. Retirement funds, they offer death benefits, which is not for a miner who was working, it's for beneficiaries. However, where we come into challenges, one of the issues that was identified was the issue of documentation that we require.
You know, one of the things that you're doing is you're seeming to deflect attention to the very fact that you're sitting on this money, and that you're earning interest, I'm sure. And to a great degree, there is this fiduciary responsibility to begin investing it, do something with that money. What are you guys doing with all of this money?
Okay. All the money that is sitting in the funds is allocated directly back to the members. It's not the funds that are earning interest.
You can't find the members. So how are you going to allocate it back when you can't find them?
All right. We keep records from inception up to now if we haven't paid you. If the fund earns interest, the money gets allocated back directly to that particular member. Now, retirement funds are also governed by the Pension Funds Act. It guides us in terms of who you pay, when do you pay. Now, it will have to be a cohesive effort between the government, the FSB, and all the regulatory bodies. If we are saying we're going to take this money and invest into other social responsibilities, it is all well and good, and we are all for that.
If I come across as being very cynical here, but I must push you on this issue, which is that it appears to me that there really isn't an incentive here, enough of an incentive that would make these funds really go out of their way in too much of a big way to ensure that these funds get dispersed. I'm just not convinced.
That is why we welcome initiatives like the Sovereign Trust, because it is now putting together all the parties that are affected, where we can start lobbying the government to say, the FSB, this is what we are faced with. What is it that we can do?
So then, Mr. Vamajele, do you buy the story from the funds that they're doing their best, they're engaging organizations like the Southern African Trust? Is it a good enough excuse for you?
I won't blame them so much that they've been sitting with these billions. But I will say that maybe on our side as mine workers, ex-mine workers, we were not that organized structurally in order to actually raise the voice. Up until we managed to get technical support from partners like the Southern Africa Trust on coming up with a regional association, of which I'm talking on that base today. And that regional association was actually launched last year in June. And of which, when you look at the period, it's very short. And when you look at the problems that are barriers to accessing this portability are so huge. And when you talk about legislation and changing legislation, it's a process.
Lisa, are you getting any closer to that time when you will begin dispersing these funds as provident funds that you're sitting on, or is it going to be the status quo that will prevail?
Chris, it's not a matter of when we will begin. We are already on it.
A positive note there. Final concluding words from you, Dr. Moyo.
Well, for us as the Trust, we are very happy that we managed to have this platform and this regional dialogue where almost all the funds were represented, the ex-miners were represented, governments were represented, unions were represented. And so for us, I think this is one good step in the right direction. Finally, also, Chris, we also need to think about the current mine workers. So we are talking about the ex-mine workers, but the current mine workers are also going through some of these challenges. So whatever system we put in place, it must be such that it addresses the past, but also the future.
Addressing the past and indeed future challenges. I just need to thank my guests for sharing those key insights into a very pressing problem facing the Southern African region, and I'm sure other regions on the African continent, around the portability of social benefits, particularly in the mining sector for South Africa and indeed for the rest of the region. That brings us to the end of this edition of Africa 360. You can join the debate on Africa by liking our Facebook page, or you can tweet us your views at Africa360_ENCA. You can also send us an email at Africa360@enca.com. So until next time, when you look forward to bringing you Africa like you've never seen it before, take care.